Hello, Reading Room. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. We're here on day number 5. So we are kind of getting through, surprisingly not too bad, this heavy-duty science book, How Large is God, written by, people with some pretty big scientific brains, but because they are believers, really study and observe and contemplate the magnificence of it all. Yeah, try it, scientists. The magnificence of it all. In the early 1960s, the first scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence was begun by radio astronomer Frank Drake. Drake, like Paul Horowitz in more recent times, was listening with a radio telescope for finely tuned signals that might be evidence of alien communications. Searches, did we already read this too? Yeah, I think we're over here. Yeah, because I started getting a little bit bothered, right? So I said, okay, we're done. Many of the best writers of science fiction are religious believers, and some of them are uninhibited in mixing religion into their fiction. Science fiction may on occasion serve as a bridge between religion and science. Olaf Stapledon's Star Maker is a fine example of such a bridge. It is a bold statement to create a theological framework for a history of the universe. Stapledon's God is an experimenter, creating a succession of universes, learning from his failures and building on his successes. Our universe is neither his first nor his last. It is a flawed experiment destined to end in tragedy, but providing a basis for other universes with fewer flaws. That just does not stand with the magnificence, once again, of God's handiwork, of his work, right? It doesn't jive with it that God would continue. He did his flood, and I'm certain that a God who makes a promise to never do a flood again, to destroy human beings, and has allowed them free choice to see what their demise will be to this great extent, right? 4,000 or 5,000 years later, still he has not interceded with the flood. No matter how much you Civil War enthusiasts or flood enthusiasts or Armageddon enthusiasts might want him to interject, no matter how much you change the narrative and how bad you are as part of the narrative to get that God to come down and do his justice, it's not on your timetable, nor is it in your control, and nor would it be, because God doesn't like you controlling things. Okay. Stapledon agrees with the poet William Blake, who wrote, "To be an error and to be cast out is part of God's design." Stapledon answers the question, how large is God, with a succession of revelations of ever-increasing scale, beginning with a single planet, then moving through systems of stars and galaxies, then encompassing our entire universe, and finally going beyond our universe to other universes inconceivable to human minds. After creating our universe, according to Stapledon, the Star Maker contemplated his work, and he saw that it was good. He knew that the creature, though imperfect, though a mere creature, a mere figment of his own creative power, was yet, in a manner, more real than himself. As he discriminated its virtue and its weaknesses, his own perception and his own skill matured. Thus, little by little, it came about, and so often before, that the Star Maker outgrew his creature. In increasingly, he frowned upon the loveliness that he still cherished. Then, seemingly with the conflict of reverence and impatience, he set our cosmos in its place among his other works. Yeah, I don't think so. You can see the roller coaster that one single paragraph can take you in, right? You can really see the roller coaster. The star maker contemplated his work and he saw that it was good. He knew that, so I feel so good. He knew that his creature, though imperfect, though a mere creature, a mere figment of his own creative power, was yet in a manner more real than himself. As he discriminated its virtue and its weakness, his own perception and his own skill matured. Thus, little by little, it came about, as so often before, that the star maker outgrew his creature. Increasingly, he frowned upon the loveliness that he still cherished. Then, seemingly with the conflict of reverence and impatience, he set our cosmos in its place among the other works. Still hope. Just a layer below. Just one little layer less. That's why I don't like that. That's why I don't like. You know what I did get, and I actually did say, hey, guess what? We're going to do it for Bookless, and then I didn't. I was like, I could do it for this class. Let me see how many pages we have. Not that many. I did get another C.S. Lewis book. I had a whole thing of them. Apparently my sister didn't think I was worthy of that, but she did think I was worthy of Letters to St. Francis that I gave her. And she never opened. And now the shiv is back in my hands as purchased by me. I mean, come on. Aren't these revelations? Did you get it? But let me show you. If you watch all of my shows, you do get little clues like that. And I swear to gosh, this is also shiv. That has to do with the idea that it's not just the rebuying and identifying, because there could be strong associations and that could be written off. It is the way in which you use them. It is not just that you identified them, but the way in which you use them, and they spark up ideas that were, as indicated, 20 years prior within that last block of my 60 years. So within the first 20 years of my life, that's when that occurred. So you have to pay attention to that stuff, or you are bleak in the mind. You just are. I mean, and what I mean by bleak is just like that little poem that we said of Star Maker. Another lower in the hope pole. Which I've said before about my pole in my bedroom. I said it. I called it the hope pole. A little lower on the hope pole. That's what that is. You're just a little lower. You think it's okay. You think it'll get you someplace. But the reality is you're just a little lower. So, the Joyful Christian, and there are 127 readings. I like C.S. Lewis's radio style, like Mere Christianity. Like my style. Like here, you get an hour of what I'm saying. If you were to put it all together, and listened to it, it wouldn't be like a cohesive book now, would it? No. It's like ideas of the time. A zeitgeist of the time. But I don't know if I've read that, because I've read a lot of C.S. Lewis. Some of it I enjoy. Some of it I really like. The Pilgrim's Reform. Oh, and that whole idea. Yikes. Again, that's what reminded me of this Bookless Classroom. We don't usually do this kind of detour. I don't think I've ever done this kind of detour in Bookless Classroom. We sit down and we read. A few detours, as you know. But this is the thing. I read this, and this is where I begin to get identified with liberal thoughts that are too liberal for traditional Christians. The person who read things like this and contemplated things like this. Then I had children, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'll be an activist in another 20 years again. After I've raised my kids, they are Jesus's age, and they are Jesus-like. Without the torturous victimization that I like to play games group does. Anyway, I think I read this, which marks me as a sort of Marxist in my younger days, right? Everyone's like, yeah, not so much. No, not so much. And now, again, uh-oh, yeah, so much. They're like, uh-oh, look out. So, I've got something in my eye. So, I'm anxious to read this book as well, because when I read something on it, it sounded very familiar to me. And so, and the truth, an alchemist, a chemist. I was just going to say, and to be honest, I still don't know what an alchemist, but then it's like, all right, it's repeated enough, but I have to get this out of my eye right now because it feels like it's growing. I cannot see. I should have put the music on for you. I just thought it was like so big it would be blinding me. And maybe that's a problem. Okay. Oh, is that something? What? Was that a big eyelash? I don't know. Hopefully the macrophages in the back of my eye is going to clear it out. Or push it forward. We'll see. See, Bookless Classroom on macrophages. No, on traditional Chinese medicine. Yeah, so we were talking about macrophages, though. Okay. So 2 books. I actually did think about bringing up in here a couple books that gave me a reason to bring them up. And that's what I'm reading. So that reminded me, though, that rise and fall of that little star maker and the rise and fall of your hopes and dreams as you read about other religions. They are hopeless. They're hopeless. And so are the people sometimes. Right? I mean, you may be like, I'm not for another hopeful anything. We call that hopeless. At the end of Star Maker, we have come very far beyond the borders of science. Stapleton is no longer writing science fiction. He has moved into a new genre of fiction that we might call deification, and looks at his characters through the windows of religion rather than through the window of science. He is not alone in the new genre. Other first-rate writers, notably Clive Lewis, isn't that C.S. Lewis? Clive Stapleton Lewis. It didn't pass me up that his name is Stapleton here. C.S. Lewis. Clive Stapleton, or Clyde Staples Lewis. And Madeline L'Engle have given us their different imaginative visions of a spiritual world, extrasensory perception. Further from the mainstream of science than extrasolar planets and extraterrestrial intelligence lies the domain of extrasensory perception, the belief that certain individuals at certain times have the ability to see and know things outside the normal channels of perception is deeply embedded in many human cultures. Many religions have incorporated this belief into ritual and dogma. Classical Greek religion and its oracles, ancient Judaism, or Judaism is how they write it, right? Had its prophets and seers. Christianity has its saints and miracles. Isaac Newton, the scientist who first demonstrated mathematically the working of the physical universe, nevertheless believed in angels and occult powers. Newton's mind was razor sharp. Hello, Newton. Whether he was dealing with the geometry of planetary orbits or with the interpretation of scripture, Newton showed a thoroughly modern skepticism in dismissing the evidence of paranormal phenomena reported by certain ascetic monks. I find it was general complaint among them that upon their entering into the profession of a monastic life, they found themselves more tempted in the flesh than before, and those who became stricter professors thereof, and on that account went by degrees further into the wilderness than others did, complained most of all of temptations. Complained most of all of temptations. The reason they gave of it was that the devil tempted them most, who were most enemies and fought most against him. But the true reason was partly that the desire was inflamed by prohibition of lawful marriage, and partly that the profession of chastity and daily fasting on that account put them perpetually in mind of what they strove against, and their idle lives gave liberty to their thoughts to follow their inclinations. The way to chastity is not to struggle with incontinent thoughts, but to avert the thoughts by some employments, or by reading, or by meditating on other things, or by covers. By immoderate fasting, the body is also put out of its due temper, and for want of sleep, the fancy is invigorated about whatever it sets itself upon, and by degrees inclines towards a delirium, insomuch that those monks who fasted most arrived to a state of seeing apparitions of women and other shapes, and of hearing their voices in such a lively manner as made them often think the visions true apparitions of the devil, tempting them to lust. Thus, while we pray that God would not lead us into temptation, these men ran themselves headlong into it. Newton was aware, as any modern psychologist, of the unreliability of human perceptions. He also was open-minded about the reality of supernatural events reported in the scriptures. In an unpublished commentary on the biblical book of Revelation, Newton writes, "If you ask where this heavenly city is, I answer, I do not know. It becomes not a blind man to talk of colors. Further than I am informed by the prophecies, I know nothing. But this I say, that as fishes in water ascend and descend, move whither they will, and rest where they will, so may angels and Christ and the children of the resurrection do in the air and heavens. 'Tis not the place, but the state which makes heaven and happiness." He found no inconsistency between a belief in the scriptures and a sharply critical view of their meaning. During the past 2 centuries, many distinguished scientists have attempted to investigate the possibility of extrasensory perception among their contemporaries. 2 distinct methods of investigation have been pursued, the anecdotal and the scientific. The pioneers of the anecdotal method belonged to the Society for Psychical Research, founded by Frederick Myers in London in 1882. Interesting. MGM. This Myers name comes up all the time. Somebody wants to be recognized. And his name is Fred Myers, by the way. The Myers guy over here, Meijer. Which isn't so far from Bill Maher. Which I've always thought. Although it is pretty far from Kip Shapersky, though, isn't it? Not so far from Frank Gerber. Interesting. Who's the Headless Horseman? London, 1882. That's the reference. That's all I'm saying. Nothing weird about that. When instances of extrasensory perception were reported, they collected evidence with great care, examined witnesses, and tried to obtain independent corroboration and documentation of their statements. The findings and supporting documents were published in the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research, always in a sober and professional style. Many of the case histories in the journal are well supported by first-hand evidence and contemporary documents. Many of the stories are attested by well-known people of high reputation. An impartial reader cannot fail to be impressed by the seriousness of the investigators. Any reader not committed in advance to dogmatic belief in the non-existence of extrasensory perception must allow the possibility that some of the stories may be true. On the other hand, a reader not committed in advance to belief in the reality of extrasensory perception must allow the possibility that the stories are untrue. In no case can the possibilities of fraud and self-deception be rigorously excluded. Anecdotal evidence can never add up to scientific proof. The essence of scientific proof is repeatability. The reality of the phenomenon is scientifically proved only if it can be repeated and observed under controlled conditions, which the universities do not promote, not one single bit. The reported instances of extrasensory perception can never be repeated under conditions controlled by a skeptical inquirer. The anecdotal evidence, no matter how carefully it may be documented, cannot be tested by the methods of science. And that goes the same thing with the Bookless Classroom and some of those herbal remedies as well. After the stories collected by the pioneers of physical research had failed to convince the skeptics, a later group of researchers attacked the problem of extrasensory perception with controlled experiments. The typical controlled experiment was done with cards carrying 5 different designs in equal numbers. An experiment to test telepathy would be done with one person, the sender, sitting alone in a closed room and looking at a succession of cards, while a second person, the receiver, sitting alone in another room, would record a succession of guesses guessing the design on each card as the sender looked at it. The card guessing would be scored by counting the number of correct guesses or hits. The game was played with many variations to test different modes of extrasensory perception and with many safeguards to prevent covert signals from passing between the participants and the experimenters. See, and the difference right here, to really explain it to you, is that you need to glean your knowledge from observations alone. Alone. You don't get to manipulate. You don't get to cut or dissect. You don't get to anything, to inject, to drug, and those are all manipulations of the situation. No, you get to do one thing: observe, watch me. You can observe me and get all the answers to your questions without any biases. And what you can also get is a general consensus as well to tap out your biases. Where did I leave off? On hits, getting hits, guesses or hits. The game was played with many variations to test different modes of extrasensory perception. And that's the whole thing that you get with science. It's a game. And then it's a gamble. And you could hear all of the gambling terminology right here. All of it just set for gambling. Here's the hypothesis. Here's the gamble. Here are the variables. We're manipulating it in condition 1 here, in condition 2 here, in condition 3 here. Place your bets. The lingo is all about gambling. All of it. Even the acronyms. STEM. STEM research. You mean stem cell research? No, I mean science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You mean stem cell research. The results of the game were often encouraging at the beginning, but usually disappointing at the end. Just like gambling, the receiver would sometimes begin a session with a long series of guesses containing substantially more hits than the 1 out of 5 expected from random chance. After the big day, results would be tabulated and hopes would rise high. But then, as the game went on from day to day, the fraction of hits would decline until in the end it did not differ significantly from 1/5. Great efforts were made, and the patience of participants strained to the breaking point with no useful result, when occasionally an experiment was reported with a startling high fraction of hits sustained for a long period. Further investigation of the experiment procedures always revealed that precaution against covert communication had been neglected. No well-controlled experiment ever gave convincingly positive results. No initial success could be consistently repeated. The failure of extrasensory perception experiments can be explained in 2 ways. First, extrasensory perception may not exist. This is the simpler explanation and is accepted by almost all scientists who are not troubled by the anecdotal evidence in favor of extrasensory perception, or by the fact that you continue to stick by your only way of measuring something that doesn't fall within your parameters of science. You can't dismiss it because it doesn't fall within your parameters. You can say, we don't study that, as, what the hell is his name? Richard Dawkins. Dick Dawkins does. Richard Dawkins, I'm sorry, wasn't he the game show host? Again with the games. They are glad to dismiss the anecdotal evidence as scientifically worthless, but a second explanation is possible, allowing us to give some weight to the positive anecdotal evidence while accepting the negative scientific evidence. The second explanation is that extrasensory perception may be real, but works in ways that make it incompatible with scientific investigation. According to the second explanation, there is a relation of complementarity between extrasensory perception and controlled experiment similar to the relation of complementarity between the wave nature and the particle nature of light. One can observe light behaving as a wave, and one can observe light behaving as a collection of particles, but one cannot observe both behaviors simultaneously. The apparatus required to observe light as particles causes the wave-like properties of light to disappear. In the same way, according to the second explanation, extrasensory perception can be observed in the uncontrolled experiences of human life, but the severe constraints of any controlled experiment situation make it disappear. And again, we said quantum physics. Anyone who has taken part in a card guessing experiment readily understands how the conditions of the experiment can destroy the more delicate human faculties. The experiment is unbearably tedious, requiring participants to spend long hours carrying out trivial and repetitive tasks. The anecdotal evidence indicates that extrasensory perception, if it occurs at all, is associated with strong emotions and important events. The tedium and triviality of the experiment seem expressly designed to exclude the intense feelings that extrasensory perception may require. It is easy to imagine that the eagerness of the participants at the beginning of the experiment might allow some slight effect of extrasensory perception to be recorded, and then as eagerness is overcome by boredom, the effect fades into significance. Nobody has found a way to design an experiment that is both rigorously controlled and emotionally interesting to the participants. It may well be that such an experiment is impossible. Oh, look again. And the requirements of emotional intensity and scientific control are necessarily incompatible. If extrasensory perception is real and the second explanation of the failure to measure it scientifically is valid, then it is purely mental faculty like love and hate and the appreciation of nature beauty, not a physical faculty like sight and hearing. It would be as unreasonable to attempt a scientific measurement of the act of extrasensory perception as to attempt a scientific measurement of the act of falling in love. Many of the most essential human faculties are inaccessible to scientific measurement. Extrasensory perception, but that doesn't mean you dismiss their impact, because their impact, just because you can't physically see it, can be great. And that is just a pile of ignorance if you do. Other examples are angels, ghosts, devils, divine inspirations, and miracles. These phenomena are all beyond the reach of science and belong to the domain of religion. Most of my scientist friends believe dogmatically that such phenomena do exist. I prefer following the good example of Isaac Newton to leave all possibilities open. As a scientist, I am not compelled to believe dogmatically in their non-existence, and as a religious person, I am not compelled to believe dogmatically in their existence. I look out at the universe through the two windows of science and religion. Through the science window, I see only a small fragment of a huge landscape that we have barely begun to explore, full of puzzles and mysteries, and therefore maybe should keep our hands off. And in that movement, quantum physics, the change that our observation on those levels creates is a big sign that says, mind your own business. Through the religion window, I see fragmentary glimpses of an even wider landscape inaccessible to the tools of science. Nothing could be more absurd than the belief that either of these two views, or both of them together, come close to being complete or final. But they can be two sides, and are two sides of the same coin. Einstein's view of science. Einstein was a rare kind of science, an exception to all rules. Einstein would not have agreed with my picture of science and religion as two windows looking in different directions. Einstein's personal religion was inseparable from his science. For him, there was only a single window. I disagree with him because I am an ordinary scientist and he was not. I give the name science worship to the faith that Einstein professes in his later writings. It is a seductive ideology because it gives to science a special place above and beyond other human activities. It gives to scientists the moral authority of a priesthood, and Einstein was the great protagonist of science worship. The essence of the ideology is contained in his famous statement made at a symposium on science and religion in 1941 when he was 62 years old. Science can only be created by those who are thoroughly imbued with an aspiration toward truth and understanding. This source of feeling, however, springs from the sphere of religion. To this, there also belongs the faith in the possibility that the regulations valid for the world of existence are rational, that is, comprehensible to reason. I cannot conceive of a genuine scientist without that profound faith. The situation may be expressed by an image. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Einstein did not subscribe to the beliefs of any conventional religion. And that was his accent. He used the word religion to mean his own private faith in the rationality of nature, but his statement has the flavor of ideological conviction. It says, in effect, anyone who does not share my faith is not a genuine scientist. It is possible to have the greatest possible respect for Einstein as a scientist and as a human being and still disgrace with his ideology, and still disagree with his ideology. It is quite untrue that science without religion is lame. Many excellent scientists have no profound faith of any kind. Einstein's statement excludes from genuine science the great multitude of people for whom science is a way to earn a living rather than a way to contemplate ultimate reality. Bring in the researchers. Bring in the research assistants. This meant that he took no interest in the work of the majority of scientists who did not share his exalted view of science. At the end of his life, he was left isolated because science forged ahead with fruitful discoveries that did not fit into his narrow view of what science ought to be. The last 10 years of Einstein's life were years of extraordinarily rapid progress in science. Young people in Italy, England, and the United States were discovering new and unexpected species of elementary particles. The new technology of microwave electronics allowed experimenters to explore the behavior of atoms with unprecedented accuracy. Every month, new experiments and new theories were announced, but for Einstein, all this joyful activity was not genuine science. He was out of touch because he could not broaden his interest to keep pace with the broadening scope of science. His single window gave him a narrow view. It has always seemed to me that his narrowness resulted from making science itself the object of religious worship. He tried to identify science with religion, to bring science and religion so close together that they could not be separated. This religion of science worship, it's not science worship. You need to stop saying that. It's worshiping and that just gets everybody up in an uproar, right? To say worshiping creation. It is worshiping God's, it is knowing God through the things that he made, and that inspires worship of him. And that's what it is. And you know what? That is very clearly stated. His works, as they were meant to be, inspire worship of him. Not to be worshiped, to inspire worship. So Einstein had it right. And you MFers who say we have to look through two different windows, that to me is narrow thinking. It already boxed you in right from the get-go. This religion of science worship was right for him personally, but it is wrong for the majority of scientists. Yet, which is, again, they are, I keep calling them undertakers. They are the untouchables of the caste system. So let's listen to what they have to say. And for the majority of religious believers, it denies both to science and to religion the freedom to be themselves, the freedom to be different. No. Who was the different one in this equation? Pay attention. Pay attention. Was that Milton Friedman? Close enough. I have seen the same tragedy played out in the lives of many scientists and teachers. A too intense science worship disqualifies them from doing useful work in the real world. Science worship is often accompanied by an intellectual snobbery that leads them to despise practical applications of science. They have Einstein's ideology without his genius, a combination that condemns them to lives of frustration. My scientific friends who clamored so passionately for the building of the superconducting super collider were also victims of science worship. They could not understand that their pleading for this project that seemed to them so noble and holy was seen by others as an exhibition of normal human greed. And that is in the conversations with God. So if you want a really, he says it's not complex, but it is. And I remember saying that back here, but people understood it and they got it. And that's the reason why it works and it flies, is that, now what was I just going to say about that? What does he say in conversation? I'm way past it. Oh, because I haven't gotten to it here anyway. I don't know. All right, hopefully it'll come back. We're at the end of it. So I'm going to just hold this out for a minute and then back up. This religion of science worship was right for him personally, but it is wrong for the majority of scientists and for the majority of religious believers. It denies both science and to religion the freedom to be themselves, the freedom to be different. Again, who is the most different and who is the least free to be that way in their scenario? Einstein himself. I have not the same tragedy played out. I've seen the same tragedy played out in the lives of many scientists and teachers. A too intense science worship disqualifies them from doing useful work in the real world. We're not of this world. Science worship is often accompanied by intellectual snobbery that leads them to despise practical applications of science. Misapplications of science. We want science. The religious people have spoken in the debates about evolution. They are not against science. It is the evolutionary scientists, for example, the hardcore atheist scientists that want nothing to do with the study of something outside of their narrow window view. Oh, what was that in Conversations About God? It hasn't come to me yet. They have Einstein's ideology without his genius. Do they really? Because they have your genius? The inability to see what Einstein was seeing? Genius. Genius. The way you flip that around. They could, my scientific friends who clamored so passionately for the building of the, superconducting super collider were also victims of science worship. They could not understand that their pleading, that was it, for this project that seemed to them so noble and holy was seen by others as an exhibition of normal human greed. And that is the Tao of this. All right. All right, so the question here is, what had I done to deserve such a life of continued struggle? I was looking for that question. Okay, and then communicate. This person has very, lets God talk a lot. To whom does God communicate? Yet so many people say their prayers have gone unanswered. No prayer, and a prayer is nothing more than a fervent statement of what is so, goes unanswered. Every prayer, every thought, every statement, every feeling is creative to the degree that it is fervently held as truth. To the degree will it be made manifest in your experience. So what in this conversation, what God is saying is what will manifest in your experience will be that fervent prayer or desire. He's not saying the answer to your prayer is going to manifest. You're going to see how that desire manifests itself. When it is said that a prayer has not been answered, what has in actuality happened is that the most fervently held thought, word, or feeling has become operative. Yet what you must know, and here is the secret, is that always it is the thought behind the thought, what might be called the sponsoring thought, that is the controlling thought. If therefore you beg and supplicate, there seems a much smaller chance that you will experience what you think you are choosing, because the sponsoring thought behind every supplication is that you do not have now what you wish. That sponsoring thought has become your reality. The only sponsoring thought which could override this thought is the thought held in faith that God will grant whatever you ask without fail. Some people have such faith, but very low. The process of prayer becomes much easier when, rather than having to believe that God will always say yes to every request, one understands intuitively that the request itself is not necessary. Then the prayer is a prayer of thanksgiving. It is not a request at all, but a statement of gratitude. When you pray that a prayer is when you say that a prayer is a statement of what is so, are you saying that God does nothing, that everything which happens after a prayer is a result of the prayer's action? If you believe that God is some omnipotent being who hears all prayers, says yes to some, no to others, and maybe, but not now, to the rest, you are mistaken. By what rule of thumb would God decide? If you believe that God is the creator and decider of all things in your life, you are mistaken. God is the observer, not the creator. And God stands ready to assist you in living your life, but not in the way you might expect. It is not God's function to create or uncreate the circumstances or conditions of your life. God created you in the image and likeness of God. You have created the rest through the power God has given you. God created the process of life and life itself as you know it. Yet God gave you free choice to do with your life as you will. In this sense, your will for you is God's will for you. You are living your life the way you are living your life, and I have no preference in the matter. This is the grand illusion in which you have engaged, that God cares one way or the other what you do. I do not care what you do, and that is hard for you to hear. You do care what your children do when you send them out to play. Yet do you care what your children do when you send them out to play? Is it a matter of consequence to you whether they play tag or hide and seek or pretend? No, it is not, because you know they are perfectly safe. That is the extraordinary part of the prayer and the faith, and how they go together, and how you're looking outside the same window, that I don't need to know your science to know that the kids are safe in a world where there is a God described by one window. Science has limited itself in explanation. It said, I'll only give you the explanations that fit within this box. And most people are saying we don't need that kind of science, right? That's not our kind of science. You're right, it is a different window. And then you've created a separate window for religion, and people aren't having it. They're just simply not having it. It's like the dualism of the body and the spirit, that you did for what purposes? Absolutely the same exact purposes, medical purposes. You living, I want to give you the picture of the hyena. So I'm going to. Don't think I'm not, because I totally am. You living jackal. You living jackal. You living hyena. Science. There is no living creature that looks like that and behaves like that. That's science. That's your science. And that's why they backed off with their big mouths. That's why they backed off with their big mouths, because this is what science creates. That's not, God does not create that, for Pete's sake. I say it was wrong in ascribing holiness to science. Then get rid of the unholiness about science. The holiness is in the universe that the science is trying to explain. No, they're not. If they omit holiness, then they are not trying to explain the universe. The science is a makeshift sketch that we shall replace as soon as we have explored a little further. God is in the richness of the phenomena, not in the details of the science. But that doesn't mean that they get to dissect it in such unsacred ways. The phenomena are God's business, the science ours. Oh, really? Is that what you think? Dyson? Is that what you think? Science worship is a new form of an old idolatry, putting a man-made image in the place of God. The essential error of Einstein was to say that science is holy, just as the essential error of the creationists is to say that religion is scientific. In truth, the glory of science lies in the clever use of tools, and the glory of religion lies in the poetry of worship. The two glories may coexist in the same human soul, but they are not the same. Yeah, so again, gives rise to things like scientific eugenics in my mind. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. That's it for part 1 of the book. Part 2, so we're able to complete each part in about 2 readings. Part 1 had 2 readings in it, and part 2 has, I think, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Part 2, coming up tomorrow, is approaches to scientific and theological answers, and there are 4 readings in that, just to give you a little heads up. Approaching God Through Paradox by F. Russell Stannard. Number 2, How Large is Faith by Herbert Benson and Marge Stark. Number 3, No Place for a Small God by Howard J. Van Til. And number 4, The God Who Infinitely Transcends Infinity by Robert J. Russell. So that's coming up. That will take us 8 days to get through. 4 readings, 8 days. Thanks so much for joining me here in the reading room. It's Wednesday, April Fool's Day. Who knows? Who knows what she's reporting today? War of the Worlds came out on April Fool's Day. I'm pretty sure it did. Thanks so much for joining me. It is April 1st. We didn't get our little April. Here it is. Here it is. It's here with us. So we've got this job done, April 1st. We've got our day 331 done, which I think we did in the Bookless Classroom. And we made the announcement that we are here on day 331, April 1st, in the classroom, in the early birds. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, where whatever we're doing, whatever announcements we're making on whatever special day it is, it's always a special day when it's 3 days on, so we can contemplate things on our 4 days off. Thanks so much again for joining me here in the classroom.